Okay, so in this video today, I want to talk about spirituality and narcissistic abuse. Quite an interesting subject. And it seems that the subject of spirituality and religion just seems to be popping up a lot lately. So I thought it would be a good topic to have a chat with you about today. So firstly, what I'd like to do is to clarify my personal situation or my personal position. Now, I was raised Catholic by Irish parents, so all my years growing up were spent towing the Catholic line. But things about the religion often just niggled me, just bothered me. So, for example, divorce is not allowed in the Catholic religion, even today. And when I first learned about such things as violent domestic abuse, it just struck me as plain wrong that a woman was supposed to stay in the marriage because she'd made vows, for better or for worse. Now, we have an expression in Ireland that is quite inoffensive compared to its British F-word counterpart, and you might have heard this, and that word is feck. If you have Irish blood in you, you'll definitely recognise that word. And I remember thinking back then, well, feck that. No God would want a woman to suffer being beaten black and blue, having her bones broken, and being hospitalised. And I just felt in my heart and soul that it was wrong, that you were expected to stay in a marriage with an abusive person. Now, then there was the cheating, of course. And I thought, well, should you stay with a man who's sleeping with another woman? Wasn't that breaking the forsaking all others part of these wedding vows that you both took? But to Irish Catholics that I knew, it didn't matter. Divorce was forbidden, no matter what the circumstances. So to my way of thinking, this religion allowed any man to beat or cheat on his wife with impunity. And that was okay with the church. But it wasn't okay with me. Now, I've always been fairly independent and I never married anyone. I turned down 2 proposals because somewhere deep in my heart, I just knew that I didn't want to be tied to vows I couldn't promise not to break if circumstances changed beyond my control, as they so often do in marriages. And actually, I was right in making that decision for myself because I was in a relationship with a man for 14 years. Much of it was unhappy. He wasn't a narcissist or he wasn't abusive, but it just wasn't a great, happy relationship. And eventually I knew that I couldn't stay with him any longer. So I broke up with him for the final time. We'd honestly had more breakups and makeups than I care to remember. So I do also understand that pull to go back into a relationship, even when in your heart you know that it's wrong for you. Now, had we been married, I would have had to go through the whole rigmarole of divorce, and I'm just glad I saved myself the trouble. But I also had, in addition to that, I've also always had this kind of need to be free. I just didn't want to be legally bound to anyone. So in my early 30s, I began digging into alternative spiritual beliefs that had nothing to do with religion. Somehow in my mind, there had to be more to God and spirituality than what religion was telling me. So my quest led me to some really amazing books that just burst open the doors of my thinking differently. None of them said that God didn't exist, and I've never been an atheist. I've always believed in God. But I came to the conclusion that most religions are about power, money, and control. If you think about it, more wars, and this has been statistically proven, more wars have been fought and more people have died in the name of religion than anything else. Now, I can remember well the Troubles, as they were called, in Ireland back in the day, where Catholics and Protestants were bombing each other to bits. And many innocent people were blown to smithereens in London during the IRA bombings. And my parents often used to talk about it. And much as my mother loved to belt out an Irish rebel song, she definitely didn't agree with these senseless killings, and neither did my father. Now, I don't believe God has anything to do with this whatsoever, because people make religions, people create wars, God doesn't. So having thought long and hard about all this, I declared myself an ex-Catholic and followed the spiritual path instead. And I'm still on that spiritual path. I believed, and I still believe, that I didn't need a priest or a pastor or any other supposedly God-appointed official to connect me with God. I didn't need the middleman because I knew I was already connected to God. And my years of subsequent study, which continue to this day, convinced me that I'm right. We are all connected to God. So I describe myself as deeply spiritual and not religious at all. So that's just my personal position. So having said all that, I want to make it really clear here that I'm not knocking or criticizing religion, because it can and does work wonders for millions of people. And if you find comfort in your religion, then that is a wonderful thing. You know, personally, I love watching Christian films like God's Not Dead and I Can Only Imagine. Wonderful. I also believe in prayer. And most of my meditations, my private meditations, involve God, Jesus, and my guardian angels. Now, I think that most people I've ever known believe in some form of higher power, whether that be God, the universe, consciousness, spirit, the fifth dimension, nature. It doesn't matter what, but they believe in something bigger than themselves. What matters to them is their belief that there is some force, some power greater than they who's really running the show. Now, I also want to say that if you're an atheist, that's absolutely fine too. We all choose our path because that is where we are meant to be right now. And these choices are deeply personal, and no one should ever try to convince you towards or away from any belief. You need to do your own thinking and make up your own mind and stick with what makes sense to you and gives you a sense of inner peace. But if you are an atheist, and I do know many people who are, then you're probably aware that you have a wise inner mind, another part of you that knows things you don't. And you might call this your subconscious, and that's a form of higher power too. So, having said all that, what does spirituality have to do with narcissistic abuse? Now, I think this is an interesting question, and I've been mulling it over for a while so I could just get an idea of how I wanted to explain it to you in a way that would be really helpful to you today. So let's start with your narcissistic relationship. Now, you've learned, because of the manipulative tactics that narcissists use, to value yourself according to how they've treated you and what they've told you you were worth. And by constantly devaluing, demeaning, and belittling you, they've stripped you of your inner belief of who you are, so that you're left feeling emotionally racked, depressed, hopeless, and your self-esteem is at its lowest ebb ever. So basically, your narc has become your higher power because you've bought into all the crap they've subjected you to. So I want to share a little exercise with you today that's going to help you to get some clarity around this issue, and that you can do as soon as you can make the time. If you want to grab a pen now, grab a pen now. It's quite an eye-opener for many people when they try this one. So normally you'll need a journal or a writing pad of some kind for this exercise, so you can just make some notes of what comes up for you. So when you sit back and think about this with your pen and your notebook in hand, ask yourself the question, who is more powerful, my higher power or my narcissist? Now really let that one sink deep down and really think about it and really feel into it, okay? Then ask yourself the next question. Is my narcissist really more powerful than my higher power? And again, really think about these questions. And then ask yourself, am I willing to believe that my narcissist is not all-powerful after all? So when you think of these questions, just sit with them and see what comes up for you. Often you'll find yourself awakening from a deep sleep like a trance, as if a big light bulb has just been switched on. When you start thinking, no, my narcissist is not my higher power, then you're ready to start building, or rather rebuilding, your inner foundation of strength. Now you can do another part of this exercise now. You can do a little comparative analysis. So get a clean sheet of paper in your journal and draw a line down the middle so you have two columns. Now in the first column, right at the top, my higher power is, and then underneath that list all the things that you can think of in that column. And these things will be, my higher power is loving, kind, forgiving, non-judgmental, trustworthy, all-knowing, and so on. Keep going until you've got everything down there that you can possibly think of. And when you've done that, go to the second column, and at the top, write, my higher power is not. And now focus on the narcissist in your life and write down all the cruel, unkind, dreadful things that he or she has done to you. So examples would be, my higher power is not cruel, sarcastic, demeaning, belittling, cheating on me, and so on, until you've covered as much as you possibly can think of to write. Get it all down on paper. And now just sit back and compare the two columns, and then ask yourself another question. And that question is, that question is, why am I so willing to believe the lies instead of the truth? And again, really think about it. Why are you so willing to let these lies define you and ruin your emotional health? And finally, when you've thought about it, I've got two more questions for you to ask. And the first one is, am I willing to stop believing the lies and start believing the truth? And the second question is, am I willing to switch my allegiance to my true higher power now? And when you are, make a commitment to reach out to your higher power for guidance, for love, for support, and help to get this person out of your life. And do this with complete faith and trust in your higher power. And never underestimate the power of prayer. Now, when I say prayer, I don't necessarily mean reciting standard prayers, although that is absolutely fine, and I do it myself. But to be clear, anytime you sincerely talk to your higher power, asking for love and help and support, that is also prayer. So do this in a way that feels really natural and comfortable for you. And if you're an atheist, tune into that wise inner mind and use it in the same way. Okay, now this exercise is designed to get you questioning your inner reality and giving you a framework to begin changing the way you've come to think and believe about yourself. Now, it's really very, very powerful. So I do recommend that you do this. So keep the paper somewhere safe and write everything down that comes up for you. Writing really helps to ground your thoughts in reality, and it will also strengthen your resolve to get out of the relationship. Or if the case is that you simply cannot leave, and I know there are women in this group who are in those relationships and they cannot get out for whatever reason, this exercise can then really help you to emotionally detach from your narcissist and focus on getting emotional support and inner peace from your higher power. And you need that inner peace. You need to give yourself some headspace. Okay, and one tip here is hide that journal, because you don't want any prying eyes reading it. You definitely don't want your narcissist seeing it, okay? So that's all I want to say about that today. So a nice short one. Now, all my videos aim to educate, help you find coping strategies and so on, but they're not therapy. They're not the therapy I do with clients who come to work with me one-on-one. So if you're really struggling, then reach out to me. I do a free 30-minute consultation. I'm happy to talk with anyone in this group to see if we'd be a fit to work together. And if we're not, that's absolutely fine. I talk to lots of women who I don't ultimately work with because there are various reasons why the fit isn't right or the timing isn't right or whatever. But don't hesitate to reach out and talk to me, because sometimes just making that step to reach out and talk to someone is a big leap in your healing journey, okay? So you know where to find me, okay?